Hello, so today we're going to be going over how to prep in PBE. So this is going to be some tips on how to get the most out of playing early for the next set that is upcoming, set 14. So a lot of you maybe have been starting to make PBE accounts and play in PBE. Some of you also joined by my stream and tried to join into my viewer lobbies as well. So this is just going to be a little bit of some tips on what to look for and some good work ethics to try and get the most out of PBE. So if you like my channel, please make sure to like and subscribe. There's going to be a lot more informed guides on set 14. Once the set actually launches, I do daily guides and sometimes some VOD reviews intermittently. So if you want to see that type of content for TFT and you want to level up your gameplay for set 14, make sure to like and subscribe because it does help me out. Now, what is PBE? So for some of you that maybe are less familiar, PBE is basically a test environment. It's a separate league client that you can just download if you just go, I have it linked in my Discord, but you can also just look up PBE for League of Legends. And what that is, it's a test environment that is basically one patch cycle ahead. So it's basically 2 weeks ahead. So right before the new set launches, which is going to be launching in a week from now, it's basically going to be in the PBE environment. So you can test out the set a little bit before it starts and before rank starts on first day of set. The idea is that you're looking to test, find bugs, as well as adjust to the new set mechanics, the new set themes and units and synergies. It's mostly just to learn ahead of time. But one thing that's important to note is that patches happen almost daily. It's very rapidly changing. So a lot of times when you're playing in PBE, what you try out one day that might be really strong or really good will be completely different and might not even work or function the same way from one day to the next. So that's something that you always have to keep in mind, and you just have to try and keep that positive but also very open mental attitude about the different units and how things are kind of playing out in this test environment. So why would you want to play in PBE? It sounds like a crap show. It's like everything's changing all the time. The set isn't fully released yet. I'll just play the set when it releases. Well, it's mostly just for like, you know, maybe like it's a little bit of like a keener thing, but it's also for people that are really excited. A lot of times you just want to get an early look at the new set. It helps you to prepare a little bit for rank just because you're starting to get accustomed and acclimated to the new units and the new synergies. So you have a little bit you have a little bit less of a chance of being super overwhelmed once the set just launches and has all these new things and all these bright little lights to look at. But mostly it's for learning, and like I said, it's if you're excited. But a lot of times in PB as well, a lot of people just try and play it just to hit the 3-star versions of units. It becomes very easy in PBE a lot of times because different people are experimenting. A lot of people aren't playing it in the most serious cutthroat style way that you might experience in a ranked ladder. So they'll just go for, like, you know, the Looney Tunes builds where they're just trying to hit as many 3-stars of the legendaries or 4 costs as possible. So it might be a good opportunity for you to do that if that's something that you like to chase and look at and just experience for yourself. So let's talk about the main takeaways that you want to have in PBE. So the main thing about PBE is you want to get familiar with the units. If you're playing PBE and you're trying to get a head start on the new set, the main reason that you're playing PBE is to get familiar with the units themselves. A lot of people misconstrue this and they kind of like fixate on other points of PBE, like playing boards and playing strong units and winning games, etc. But the main thing that you want to do is you want to have an understanding of what these units are and how they intertwine with each other. So this is just Team Planner of set 14. If I show this to somebody who hasn't played any of set 14 PBE, what does any of this mean? What units are what board is what, how do things fit together? It's overwhelming, it's a little bit difficult. But the idea is that you want to be able to recognize the units for what they are as a function. If I look at this and I see this guy as Galio, for example, I want to know what are the synergies of Galio, Cypher, and Bastion. What does Bastion give me? What does Cypher give me? Why would I want to play this Galio over another Bastion unit, etc.? The idea is just that you have to be able to recognize the unit and know them for their functional purpose on your board and how that intertwines with other parts of this game. So a lot of that also deals with getting familiar with synergies as well as mid-game carries. I'll give an example, right? Let's say you start out the game and you have good components for a Gwyn. So I'll just pick a random unit here, Kindred, right? Let's just take this Kindred unit. Whatever these synergies are, who cares? But let's just say you have a Gwynsu, right? With this Gwynsu components, this is your opener, right? what does this mean for you? Is Kindred going to be your mid-game carry? Is Kindred a good Guinsoo user? Potentially. Kindred really likes attack speed because she has rapid fire synergy and marksman synergy that kind of fit into that auto attacker AD kind of build. But then you have to think to yourself, if I'm playing around 4 cost or if I'm playing around reroll, is Kindred a rerollable unit? Will this unit actually, like, does it have synergies that work really well, that there's a lot of low cost units that fit in nicely? It does, because it has Nitro, and Nitro is like a more reroll focused trait. But that's something that you learn from being in PBE and reading, and maybe reading ahead of it or watching some of my videos that introduce some of the traits. But the main thing that you want to know is, like, what are your game plans for later, right? For example, because I've played a little bit and I have a little bit of knowledge, if I have a Guinsoo, a really good Guinsoo holder eventually is Zeri. So if I'm playing around Zeri, what synergy works really well with Zeri? Because if Zeri is going to be a backline Guinsoo holder, I'm probably going to want to have her traits activated, maybe Exotech and Rapid Fire. But if I'm thinking about Zeri, what frontline could I build? What backline do I build? A lot of it is just knowing intrinsically what type of units fit into what boards. So for example, something that's really common with Zeri is playing Bastions, because Bastions have a good synergy with Exotech, because 2 of the units, Sejuani and Jax, are both Exotech units. So you could basically get all 3 of these, all these 3 of these synergies activated with these couple of units. And then you have to think to yourself, okay, do I want to play deeper into Bastion? Or do I want to play something else? It's not just a matter of just like having a bunch of stuff in your team planner, but it's also the journey of getting there. Because obviously, if I just show you this board, I'm sure a lot of you might have seen it if you're playing a lot of PBE, or if you're playing a lot of Set 14, or watching Set 14 videos, or watching Set 14 streamers. You'll see something that looks like this a lot of the time. And you might look at this and say to yourself, okay, that's my final board. I'll just put in my team planner, call it a day, hard force it, GG, it's all good. The problem is, how do you get there from your mid game? Like, what bastions and what early game synergies do you have? What 2 cost user is a good Guinsoo holder, and what 1 cost user is a good Guinsoo holder? Stuff like this is what you start to get acclimated to the more you play a set. And I'm sure a lot of you, if you've played a lot of Set 13, which we've been talking about for the past couple months, this is something that becomes a little bit more comfortable throughout playing multiple games of Set 13. And the idea of playing in PBE is to get those type of experiences. It doesn't matter necessarily to say, oh, I'm just going to hard force this comp in PBE, which that is a way of learning as well, and that's something that can help you out in order to understand how the units function. But majority of your time spent in PBE should be focused on kind of meandering around in your early game and understanding where that can lead to your late game. So for example, I'm giving you the idea of like an early Guinsoo. You know, you might want to hold on to some Bastion units, but at the same time, you might want to build around like an early game synergy. Something like, you know, a Draven Cypher might work really well. You get a cash out leading into that, right? So like sometimes you might have a board that looks like this if you have early 3 costs, and then play around Cypher, get your early cash out, and then transition into a full Zeri Bastion board because you have some of the cornerstones of it. Another example could be to play around Nitro, because Nitro, you have a Bastion unit in Shyvana, but then you also have Kindred who can hold the Guinsoo for your early game. So you can start your game off not committing to Nitro. Maybe you can leave it open if you want to reroll Nitro units, but you can play an early Nitro board for your stage 2 and stage 3, and then transition into a Zeri Bastion board around the Shyvana and the Kindred until you can synergize to get better synergies in. Stuff like that is what's really important, and it's not exactly perfect, but the idea is that these are skills that you can build from understanding what the units are and their synergies, and these are things that will be easily transferable when the set goes live. Because the best thing that you can do is, if I just show you 5 random units, here I'll just click a bunch. If this is your shop and I show you these units, you have to be able to recognize them for where they fit in and what boards you can possibly build around them. Because if I just show you this Echo and I say he's a strategist, if you're spending your entire round saying, okay, well, what are the other strategist units? What are the other street demon units? What are the other bruiser units? What are the other cyberboss units? The idea is that you want to have kind of like building blocks almost, right? So if I see an Echo, for example, I know that Echo with Street Demon synergizes really well with Nico, who is also a Street Demon and a strategist. I can think about the building blocks of, okay, so I have this strategist that builds with Street Demon. I can play either vertical Street Demon, or I can play towards strategist. If you're playing around these, who is your backline carry? Is it AP or AD? If I'm thinking about like the AMP variation, then Samira is an AD 5 cost. And a lot of that comes into play as well with items, right? I think I talked about it as well with mid-game carries and familiar yourself with boards. Another thing that you have to do is just kind of know what units want as their main, quote-unquote, main form of attack generation or damage generation. So a lot of times there's going to be AP casters, right? I'll just pick 4 costs to make this a really good simple thing, right? So let's just take a bunch of 4 costs, right? Zed is a melee user, so that's going to be your resident holds melee items, right? If you're looking at these other units, right? If you look at somebody like Vex, right? Knowing ahead of time that Vex is a 30 mana unit is a great indicator that you probably want to have blue buff on her, right? If you have lower than 50 mana, rule of thumb, typically blue buff is better than a Shojin for mana generation. However, you take somebody like Brand, for example, at 70 mana, he's going to have a much harder time generating that mana. So if you have a Brand, you're probably going to want a Shojin on him. Meanwhile, you have units like these, Zeri, Aphelios, and even Xayah. Xayah, it's a little bit unknown if Shojin or Guinsoo is going to be better. Xayah might turn into a unit more like Corki, I think a lot of people are anticipating, where you just put neither mana generation nor like items, you just put like full damage items on her. But Aphelios and Zeri, a lot of people feel really comfortable putting Guinsoos on them. And the idea is that before you even start the game, kind of looking at your early game components, you should be able to plan around those components to think about what units could possibly make use of those components, because that will structure what boards you will play. And a lot of that comes with familiarizing yourself around the units. But these are very, as you can see, I'm not talking about like 3 item sets and BIS items and the best things for them. I'm talking very functionally that won't really change when the set goes live. The idea that, okay, this unit is a typical low mana threshold unit, or this unit is a high mana threshold unit, and you can do this to a lot of the in-game carries, many of the 3 costs as well as the 5 costs, and say to yourself, what do I want to put on these units? And you can try that out. If you can theorize about it, try it out in PBE and experiment as much as you can, because once you experiment around it, then you'll have a little bit of like a breaker point before the set actually goes live. Now, I gave you a lot of tips on like stuff and how I kind of approach PBE. I also wanted to say what not to do in PBE a lot. I think a lot of people get really fixated on winning. I think there's this appeal that I'm going to be the best player ever and I'm going to win every game that I play, and it gives you a lot of confidence, and then the set goes live and you lose every game and you're hard stuck and it's equally as bad, and it's like, why did I even bother playing so many games in PBE? Well, the idea is that you don't want to repeatedly play strong boards in PBE. You want to try and play as many different boards as possible to familiarize yourself with as many units as possible. Just having vague understandings of how everything works is going to help you a lot, because as soon as the set goes live, there's going to be a patch. There's going to be an A patch, there's going to be a B patch. Look at set 13. There was an A patch, a B patch, and a C patch all within a week that greatly shifted up the meta. The idea is that there's going to be patches. Even in PBE, every single day there's a patch. Something that's strong one day is weak the next day. So when you're experiencing PBE, a lot of it isn't to necessarily understand to a fine-tooth comb how strong and what units are and what their BIS items are, because those things will change a lot. Additionally, you don't want to grief others or contest rerolls, because you don't want to be putting yourself in an experience where you're not getting the most out of learning about the boards that you're playing. You don't want to just purposely make somebody not be able to create their board. A lot of PBE is looking at your own board and looking at all the other people's boards in the lobby, and that gives you the most amount of knowledge of as many comps as possible. See how matchups work. If somebody's playing the same carry as you, that's fine if it's a 4-cost carry, because it can usually support 2 people, but then you can look their items versus your items. If their items are better or your items better, the augments, all the other stuff. The idea is that you want as many people in PBE typically to hit their boards so you can see exactly what's going on, instead of just like trying to win, because then you don't learn as much. If you hit your board and somebody else doesn't, you successfully prevent them from hitting their board. When the set goes live, how do you know if your board is actually strong? What if you fight the same situation when the set goes live, and assuming there's no patches and it's exactly the same, how do you know if your line is optimized properly or their line's optimized properly? It's just less information in general, and you want to try and get as much information as possible, because it's a test environment. The points don't matter. You're going to uninstall the PBE client probably as soon as the set goes live anyways, and you're not going to look at it for 4 months. It doesn't matter if you win that one fight or not. Another thing, you never want to be 100% sure about everything. You always want to be challenging the ideas that you're putting there, and you never want to fixate on the current patch because things will greatly change. I'll give you one example, right? There's a lot of talk about Vex as a unit right now. Vex is getting completely reworked. So PBE has been out for a week. They're changing Vex's kit to make it more viable for her to have Gunblade as one of her better items. So they're making her more scale with her Omnivamp a little bit better because they're realizing that it didn't work as well. And I don't know if the change went through yet, but this was something that was talked about like yesterday or the day before that. Items and the quality of the items and which items are good on what units. These are things that are always going to be changing. But in general, you just have a general idea of this unit is AP or AD. This unit is high mana versus low mana. This unit is an auto attacker. This unit is a tank. This unit is a melee carry. Understanding those things and then building around those and trying out different synergies can help give you a good understanding of how things work. And then what I would always recommend is not to burn out. So I didn't put it on the list here, but this is something that I'm doing. So for example, I played PBE all of last week. This week, I'm going to take it easy. And then the couple days before the set actually launches, I'll probably play a lot more PBE. But either way, I'll post a schedule. And if you guys want to join viewer lobbies, I'll say when I'm live with viewer lobbies in my Discord. And I'll also say it on YouTube. I have the little schedule that I post once per week. But the idea is that you don't want to spend too many hundreds of games playing in PBE. A lot of times it helps to play a lot more games closer to the actual launch, because if there's only 1 or 2 patches before the launch, you'll have a little bit more of an idea or a baseline of how things work, and then you can read the final patch notes before the live release and then get a good idea of what units are strong, what boards are strong. And that's what I'm going to do in order to properly give you guys a heads up. I'm also going to do that on YouTube. I'm going to say, hey, these are some boards to try out. So don't worry, if you don't want to play PBE, I'll do it for you, and I'll tell you guys like when the patch launches and when the set goes live. Hey, here's a little starter kit of some comps you can try out that should give you some success in your early ranked journeys. But anyways, thanks for watching. I just wanted to give a little bit of an idea of playing in PBE. This kind of came about because a lot of times I'm getting a lot of questions or some general like concerns about like how should I approach this? Should I even play PBE? Honestly, it's not super useful. I wouldn't be surprised. You don't even have to play PBE at all. I wouldn't recommend it. I think that it often burns people out a lot more than it helps them, because you spend so much time creating boards and theory crafting and reading shit. And because there's a patch every single day, a lot of times you're just eating up so much time, constantly rewriting the things that you're thinking up and things that you're cooking up, that often it's better just to play a lot more once the set goes live. And just use that as your primary learning experience. But like I said, the main thing you want to do if you want to get a head start, make sure that you kind of get that into the back of your mind of being able to recognize what every unit is, what every unit does, and all the synergies and how those synergies intertwine with one another, especially in order to create boards that seem like they would work, right? Have a balance of a front line and a back line. But anyways, short video for today. Hopefully that was a little bit helpful. We're going to do some more content leading up to the real set, and then like I said, once the set releases, it's going to be lots and lots of guides, a lot of rehashes of some of the previous guides that I put out, but with the set 14 twist on them. So there's going to be new item guides, new comp guides, new rank up guides, all of those just with the set 14 flavor on them. So that's all coming. I'm working on them ahead of time a little bit, so look forward to that, and thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day, and see ya. Bye bye.